When I was a very small boy, Halley's Comet visited our solar system. For a long time I did not see the giant in the sky because I was not permitted to remain up after sundown. My chums had seen it and had told me perfectly amazing things about it. Also, I had heard of what were called comet pills. The theory was that if the pills were taken according to directions, then when the tail of the comet struck the earth, one would not be consumed. One night I was awakened by my mother, who told me to dress quickly and come with her out into the backyard to see the comet. I shall never forget it if I live forever. My mother stood with me, her hand resting on my shoulder, while I, in utter, speechless awe, beheld the great spectacle with its fan of light spreading across the heavens. The silence was like that of absolute motion. Finally, after what seemed to me an interminable time interval, I found my speech. With bated breath I said, "What will happen to us if that comet falls out of the sky?" My mother's silence was so long that I looked from the comet to her face, and there I beheld something in her countenance that I had seen only once before, when I came into her room and found her in prayer. When she spoke, she said, "Nothing will happen to us, Howard. God will take care of us."
To reflect on the text that we just heard, AI read, we will explore the study of 5 words, phrases, or terms from Howard Thurman's Jesus and the Disinherited. The following word study was completed using Van A. Harvey's A Handbook of Theological Terms, their meaning and background exposed in over 300 articles. And these words from Howard Thurman are from Chapter 2 on the topic of fear. Our first word is God. Who is being described? The anthropomorphic God of caregiving, or the absolute God of the cosmos? Understanding this tension is a challenge and problem of this text and of theology itself. In philosophy, God is referred to as the absolute, which is unknowable and unsearchable. Yet the anthropomorphisms found in this excerpt are the attribution of human characteristics to God, due to God being taken on personally by Howard Thurman and his mother. If the absolutism of God were definitive in this excerpt, then Howard's mother's prayer life would be altered, but she would then have to pray to a more philosophical or less knowable God, as opposed to the caregiving God described in the text. Caregiving is communicated when Howard's mother says, "God will take care of us," which is a human characteristic assigned to God. Depending on the listener, this excerpt may hold attention well and not lean too heavily in one direction or the other. A philosophical absolutism or a theological anthropomorphism. Our second word is providence, which relates to the phrase in the excerpt, "God will take care of us." Providence has 3 modalities. Conservatio, God conserves all creation. Concursus, God has provided for creation before the fall of Adam and humankind, thus sustaining them, which is a dialectic between human action and God's action. Ubernatio, by which God fulfills judgment and governs people by guiding them towards God's will. In this passage, gubernatio isn't clearly applicable beyond taking a negative interpretation of Halley's Comet falling from the sky and essentially destroying all people. It is more likely that providence, God will take care of us, is applicable using conservatio, where God conserves all of creation. Our third and fourth words are anxiety and cosmology, which relate to the phrase and term in the excerpt, comet falls out of the sky, and solar system. Howard Thurman's worry about the comet that could fall out of the sky is an expression of non-being, and the treatment of non-being in human existence as described by philosophers and theologians Kierkegaard, Rudolf Bultmann, Paul Tillich, Roald Niebuhr, who all discuss anxiety as non-being stemming from the fall of Adam and humankind. This anxiety is different from a psychological or pathological anxiety. It is a philosophical anxiety searching for a theological answer. Howard Thurman's story may also cause a listener to consider how the solar system ultimately operates, which is also an area of study called cosmology, which means doctrine of the world or universe, as defined by the ancient Greeks. Our fifth word is eternity, which relates to the word forever in the excerpt. Howard Thurman says, "I shall never forget it if I live forever," which is a statement about his memory of Halley's Comet and a brief reflection on immortality. This discussion about immortality can be seen as a hyperbolic statement about himself and also his impression of Halley's Comet. His mentioning of comet pills is also in the category of hyperbole and superstition as well, which can be found in the people of his neighborhood.
I have in my possession a copy of a letter from Mahatma Gandhi to Muriel Lester. The letter says in part, "Speak the truth without fear and without exception, and see everyone whose work is related to your purpose. You are in God's work, so you need not fear man's scorn. If they listen to your requests and grant them, you will be satisfied. If they reject them, then you must make their rejection your strength. The acceptance of this alternative is to be simply, directly truthful, whatever may be the cost in life, limb, or security. For the individual who accepts this, there may be quick and speedy judgment with attendant loss. But if the number increases and the movement spreads, the vindication of the truth would follow in the wake. There must always be the confidence that the effect of truthfulness can be realized in the mind of the oppressor as well as the oppressed. There is no substitute for such a faith."
Five words: truth, judgment, movement, wake, faith. We may begin our consideration of this text with the second definition of truth found in the American Heritage Dictionary: fidelity to an original or standard. It is also useful that the French word for truth, vérité, from the Latin root verum, can lead us to the English word verify. A political movement is a struggle for truth. The struggle can relate a new truth in the situation. In his letter to Muriel Lester, Mahatma Gandhi advises her to speak the truth. Howard Thurman says that the acceptance of this alternative is to be simply, directly truthful, whatever the cost. The context indicates that the truth involved here is the truth of the oppressed. That is, the truth about the lived nature of oppression. Thurman understands that this truth is a threat to the oppressor's position and will likely result in him exercising quick and speedy judgment against the oppressed. The truth of the oppressed is inaccessible to the oppressor because the logic of his existence precludes it. The oppressor short-circuits the path to truth by exercising judgment. The willingness of the oppressed to risk life, limb, and security is the cost of speaking the truth. By accepting this cost, the oppressed does three things. 1. He shows solidarity with others who are willing to speak. This should lead to an increase in the number of individuals who will attest to this truth and join the movement. When Thurman met Gandhi at Bardoli in 1936, part of their discussion revolved around the necessity of getting the masses to support the movement, something which at that point Gandhi had not yet succeeded in doing. 2. By putting their bodies in the way of the actions resulting from the speedy judgment, the oppressed attempt to cast doubt on the validity of the short circuit of the oppressor. The risks for the oppressor in terms of life or limb are lower than those of the oppressed. The movement must raise the costs for the oppressor. 3. The power of the movement is partially in the force it can generate by developing its own ethics. Thurman, following Gandhi and parallel to Martin Luther King, advocated nonviolent resistance as a core ethical principle. A political event, such as a revolutionary consciousness developing amongst the masses, creates a wake. The process follows the outline of what philosopher Alain Badiou would call a truth procedure. The procedure follows in the wake of an event and attempts to verify that the event did in fact happen. In the struggle of oppressed versus oppressor, the character of the event might take many forms: non-cooperation, resistance, marches, speeches, uprisings, and so on. The event and its truth procedure hope to give rise to a change of the situation, including the overthrow of the oppressor. In the struggle of the oppressed against the oppressor, the oppressed must have the faith that the truth of their struggle will emerge. Faith is the bridge that carries the oppressed through the trials they must endure.
When I was a very small
There
boy,
must always be the
Halley's Comet
confidence
visited our solar
that the
system.
effect of truthfulness can be realized
For a long time, I
in
had
the
not
mind
seen
of
the
the
giants in
oppressor
the sky,
as well as the
because I
oppressed.
was not permitted to remain up after
When I was a
sundown.
small boy, Halley's Comet visited our
My
solar
chums had
system.
seen it, and had told me perfectly amazing
The letter
things about
says
it.
in part, speak
Also,
the
I had
truth
heard of
without
what were
fear
called
and without
comet
exception, and see everyone whose
The
work
theory
is
was that
related
if the
to your
pills were
purpose.
taken according to directions.
For a long time I did
And
not
when
see
the
the
tail of the
giant in
comet
the
struck
sky
the earth,
because I was not
one would
permitted
not be
to
consumed.
remain up after sundown.
One night, I
If
was
they
awakened by
listen
my
to your
mother,
requests and grant
who
them,
told me to dress
we will
quickly
be satisfied.
and come with her out into the backyard.
My chums
See the
had seen
comet.
it and had told me perfectly amazing
I
things
shall never
about it.
forget it if I live forever.
Also, I heard of what were called comet
My mother
pills.
stood with me, her hand resting on my
The
shoulder,
acceptance of this alternative
while I,
is
and
to
other
be
species
simply
all,
directly truthful,
beheld the
whatever
great
may be the
spectacle
cost
with its
of
fan
life,
of light
limb, or
spreading across the
security.
heavens.
But if the
The
number
silence
increases
was like that
and the movement
absolute
spreads,
motion.
the vindication of the
Finally,
truth would
after
follow in
what
its
seemed
way.
to be an interminable time interval,
The theory
I
was
found my
that if the
speech.
pills were taken according to
With
directions,
bated breath I said,
then when the tail of the comet
what will
struck the
happen to
earth,
us
one
if the
would not
comet
be
falls out of the
consumed.
sky?
One night,
My
I was
mother's
awakened by
silence
my
was so
mother,
long
who told me
that I
to
looked
dress
from the
quickly
comet
and
to her
come out
face,
into the backyard
and
to
there
see
I
the
beheld
comet.
something in her countenance
I shall never forget it
that I had
if I
only
live
seen
forever.
once before. When I came
My
into her
mother
room
stood with me,
and
her
found her
hand
in
resting
prayer.
on her shoulder, while I,
When she spoke,
in
she
utter
said,
speechless awe,
"Nothing will
beheld the
happen
great
to us,
spectacle
Howard.
with its fan of light
God will take care of
spreading
us."
across the heavens.
I
The
have in my
silence
possession a
was
copy
like
of
that
a
of
letter from
absolute
Mahatma
motion.
Gandhi to
For
Muriel
the
Leslie.
individual who accepts this,
The
there
letter
may be
says in
quick
part,
and speedy judgment
"Speak the
with
truth,
attendant loss.
without fear and without exception,
Finally, after what seemed
and
to
see
be
everyone
an
whose work is
interminable
related
time
to your
limit,
purpose.
I found my speech.
So you are in God's work.
If they reject them,
So you need
then
not
you
fear
must make
man's
their
scorn.
rejection your strength.
They listen to your requests and
With
grant
bated
them.
breath I said,
You
what
will
will
be
happen to
satisfied.
us if the comet falls out
If
of
they
the
reject
sky?
them, then you must make their
You are in
rejection your
God's work.
strength.
You need not fear
The
man's
acceptance
scorn.
of this alternative is to be
My
simple,
mother's silence was
directly
so
truthful,
long that I
whatever
looked
may
from
be
the
the
comet
cost
to
of
her
life,
face,
limb, or
and there I
security.
beheld something in her countenance that I had
For the
only
individual
seen
who
once
accepts
before,
this,
when I had
there
come
may be
into
quick
her
and
room
speedy
and found her
judgment
in
with
prayer.
attendant loss. But if the number
I
increases,
have in my possession a
and the
copy of
movement
a letter
spreads,
from Mahatma Gandhi to
the vindication
Muriel
of the
Leslie.
truth would follow in the wake.
When she spoke, she said,
There must always
"Nothing
be
will
the
happen to
confidence
us, Howard.
that the effect
God
of
will take care of
truthfulness
us.
can be realized in the mind of the oppressor,
There is no substitute for
as
such a
well
faith."
as the oppressed. There is no substitute for such a faith.